What's up, YouTube? Welcome to another episode of the Undergrad Forum. Now, today is December 12th, and it's been a couple weeks since I've made my last video. I meant to make it earlier, but there's good news, and it's because I've been really busy with a brand new class I started in medical school It's the most classic class. It's often considered the most difficult class of the MS1 curriculum, and that's anatomy. Yeah, you have cadavers, you have lecture, you have practical exams, you have written exams, you got to be in the lab teaching yourself. I mean, it's a pretty exciting class. It's completely different than everything else we've ever had, and it is intense. You literally learn where everything is, its name, its function, its innervation, its origin, its insertion. I mean, it's pretty cool. If you have any kind of surgical interest, or if you're just always kind of curious where things are and what they do, what better class than anatomy? So I had my first anatomy exam and my first practical today. So I thought I'd tell you guys what anatomy is like in medical school, because I never had it in undergrad, and the first day of anatomy was my first anatomy lecture ever, and unfortunately it was in medical school, so I had a lot of catching up to do. So anatomy, you say we're thinking, look at Webster's dictionary, you get like a nice generic definition, but it's pretty obvious. Where are things? What do they do? What are they innervated by? What's below something else? What's next to it? You kind of got to know where everything is in the body with respect to orientation and function. So it's very useful. Imagine a physician not knowing that, not too good. Pretty useful. So how does the class work? So my school, I think, is just like every other school. We kind of go by systems. So we'll do the back first, then we'll do the thorax, then we'll do the mediastinum, so like the heart, the lungs, and maybe we'll do limbs. I don't know how the rest will go, maybe head and neck at the end of the year. But, so you have lecture for anatomy like you do for any other class, you have lecture. But what's unique about anatomy is you have something called, you can call it lab, you can call it cadaver lab, whatever you want to call it. It's like having lecture, to lecture you on the back muscles. And then you go into lab with like your dissection group, and you and one other person, or maybe two other people if you're in a three-person group, you have a cadaver, and you dissect whatever you're studying in the class, and then you learn. It's pretty simple concept. You go to lecture, then you go to work on your cadaver. That was an experience I wasn't really too ready for. Working with cadavers, it kind of takes a little while to get used to it. Because these are, real bodies that people donated to medical students to use. I think it's called the Will Body Program. You can Google it. But it's outrageously generous by people who are willing to donate their bodies to science or medicine, whatever you want to call it. And literally you have, these cadavers, and you just work on them. And it's pretty amazing how that works. I mean, it's... at first I thought, before starting the class, what's the point of the cadavers? Can't we just learn by looking at an atlas? Or following along a lecture, or just like Googling things. But to my surprise, working on a cadaver is an amazing experience. I mean, getting your hands in there, seeing what nerves feel like, seeing what arteries feel like, feeling various tissues and various like connective tissue and muscles. Getting that kind of real interaction has actually been really useful. And I heard something the other day about using motor memory as a means to get whatever you're learning into your deep memory. I have no backup or any kind of evidence for that, but I heard it from someone, and it kind of made sense, because when you're in the cadaver lab, say you're looking at like the phrenic nerve, and you're touching it, you're seeing where it goes, you're reading the function in your notes, and you're doing this all at the same time. You have all these stimuli, all these reinforcements going to give you apparently long-term memory. And I think it really works, because if you just think about it, it kind of makes sense. I don't know what the science is behind it, but if you're there, you're working with your hands, you're feeling the things, you're also reading your notes and reviewing, it's a pretty hands-on approach to learning, and it's quite memorable, because you remember what you touched, where you were in lab, and what it does. It's pretty enjoyable. I didn't have those kind of revolutionary experiences, or some kind of like awakening while working on a cadaver like some people have. To me, it was uncomfortable to begin with, and then as you start to work on the body, you remove the more superficial layers that kind of define us as people. So once you remove like the skin of the back, you open up the chest, it becomes more like you're working on a certain part of the body as opposed to working on a human body. So once you removed all the back skin, the back fat, and you're working on the muscles, and you start taking those apart, it really doesn't feel like you're working on a body, which makes it much easier. So to those of you who have concerns about cadaver, Do not worry about it. It is part of the experience everyone goes through. It's uncomfortable to begin with. It takes a while, but after a couple days, you're in there. You're so busy trying to learn everything, you forget the fact that you're working on a cadaver. You become really focused on your goals, and it's a really unique learning opportunity and an extremely priceless learning tool. So I think you can tell that I absolutely love anatomy. I never took it before starting medical school. Some people say, take it while you're in college. Some people say don't. You're going to be taught it differently in medical school. I have no idea what's the right answer to this one. But regardless, I didn't take it, and I'm doing just fine, and I'm absolutely loving it. So regardless of which option you choose, of if you take it or do not take it undergrad, if you do, I'm sure you'll have an advantage because you'll know things, and if you don't, you'll be like in my shoes and you'll be just fine. So either way, do whatever you want, and in the end, it'll work out for you. So that's with respect to anatomy. Now let me give you guys a few updates. So anatomy exams, let me just say about that. So at my school we have multiple choice exams regarding the content. Pretty typical. Then you have what are called practical exams, part of the same process. So I had mine today. So like from 8 to like 10, I had a written exam, so that was the multiple choice section, and then from like 10:30 for another like hour or two, I had my practical section where you go down to the cadaver lab, and there's like so many, I think it's close to 100 stations that are marked on different bodies or on different models, on different organs, and a certain structure will be marked, and you can be asked what's called a primary, secondary, tertiary question regarding that structure. So this is where coming from, you take all the lecture content that you studied, of what the structures do, what their functions are, what are they innervated by, what's an antagonist, what's an agonist, whatever, what a certain drug will do to that function of that organ or tissue. You take all that stuff you studied and you put it into, where are things in the body. So you go to a body, it'll be pinned. It could be, they could have a little pin around a certain vein. They could ask you, what is this thing that's pinned? They could ask you, what's the function of it? What's the function of the thing right deep to it? What's the function of the things to the left of it? What does this drug do if it's a dilator? So they can ask you anything. So the whole function of this practical component of anatomy lab is going in there, seeing the actual organs, and they're seeing if you can identify structures, on a fundamental level, and then kind of go more, I guess I'd say advanced with your content. So you identify the structure, and then you answer questions that are more, secondary, tertiary content. So anatomy is really involved with respect to knowing where things are in the body and being able to identify it. If someone shows you the spinal cord, you need to be able to point to the sympathetic trunk. You need to be able to point to these splanchnic nerves. That's just what is expected, and apparently every medical school does this. So if you're going into surgery or not, you still need to know it. And I think it'll probably come in handy when you're doing physio to know where things are. I don't know, I'll come back to that. Hopefully it does, because otherwise that'd be kind of weird to spend all this time learning anatomy. But regardless, so that's anatomy. It's a really fun class. Don't worry about it if you didn't take it in undergrad. I didn't, and everything's just fine. There's plenty of time to teach yourself the basics, and there's not all that much to teach yourself because you can really catch on pretty quickly. And spending some time in the lab will make things great. And that's the one tip I'm going to give out for anatomy. Yes, study a lot for lecture, study for the test, get ready like you would for any other class. But this practical component is pretty significantly difficult, to my surprise. Fortunately, I was really worried about anatomy because I had no previous experience, so I spent a lot of time in the cadaver lab. I kept going in there every morning really, really early, and I studied in there. I had my atlases in there. I was referencing the bodies. I looked at a wide variety of bodies to see where things are in different bodies and how they look, and that's the way I did it. I think that's the best benefit I had. If I was sitting in my room and studying and not being next to the cadavers, I think I would have been at a disadvantage. So if you can, spend more time in the cadaver lab. Even if you're just standing there and reading from an atlas or reading your lecture notes, you have the ability to just go right to the body, look at what you're studying, have this kind of motor, kind of aspect of your memory of here it is next to this, you see it for real, and then you can go back to studying. I just think it's an added bonus, it's an added variable of learning. It can only help. So there's the video on anatomy. Sorry it's been a while. I mean, we've had 2 weeks and I've been kind of adjusting to anatomy. I've been meaning to make a video, but I just kind of forgot. So this is my anatomy video, day after the the evening of the anatomy exam. Pretty tired. So let me know if you guys have any questions regarding some of the videos I've been making of late. Let me know if you want me to cover some topic. I have not been able to record lecture because whenever I go to lecture, I forget. I'm sorry. I kind of go there and I keep telling myself, one of these days I'm going to do it, but I never get around to it. I'm sorry. So I'll try to do that. I'll try to think of some better ideas. But if you guys have any suggestions, send me a message, post them below, and I'll try to get back to you guys. And as always, guys, enjoy your studies and have fun. Bye.